Okay, I think everybody's ready now for the presentation about building fully decentralized full-stack applications. I would like to welcome to stage Nader Dabit, and as you like those interesting facts about our speakers, I'm going to tell you something about Nader. So when he was young, he swallowed a sewing needle, and then he had to go to hospital, and he's got a massive scar like this, very scary. Okay,
I tell people that I was shot or I was stabbed because it sounds a lot cooler than that. So.
Oh yeah, that's a good story.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Nader Dabit. I have been in Web3 for a little over a year and 3 months at this point. I've been working with the Graph protocol and Edge and Node for most of my career, and then about 4 weeks ago, I joined a company called Celestia, and we're building the first modular blockchain network. But I'm also really interested in the entire Web3 tech stack, and this is kind of what this talk is about, is how to actually build with a piece of that tech stack. I came from a traditional background of being a software developer, mobile developer, and a cloud developer in the Web 2 quote-unquote world for about 9 years. So I kind of typically take some of the mental models that I have from being a software developer in that space and try to apply them here, because I think it's a good way to allow developers to kind of understand how to build applications in this new, different, and kind of weird and hard to understand sometimes paradigm by kind of like taking some of these ideas and applying them in Web3. And this talk in particular is kind of how we can build out applications, Web3 applications, not only with the back end, but how can we actually deploy a front end that is Web3, whatever that means. And I'm hoping by the end of this talk, you have a decent understanding of that. And there's a couple of ways to do that, but the one that I'm going to be focusing on, or the protocol that I'm going to be focusing on today, is Arweave. So who in this room has used Arweave? Okay. What about IPFS? A lot more people, right? Okay, cool. Well, there's quite a few things in common between the two, but Arweave is a protocol that allows you to store data permanently with a single upfront fee. This is really, really powerful when you start understanding what this means and how you might be able to apply this and leverage this in building applications in Web3. So a couple of similar technologies that you might use that are really, really great as well with different trade-offs are IPFS and Filecoin. The main differences are with IPFS and with Filecoin and with pretty much any other type of storage, you have this idea of needing to pay some type of concurrent or consistent cost to keep your data available. It's not like a blockchain where you can just save a transaction and then you can read it 10 years later as long as the protocol exists, like we can with Ethereum. With IPFS and with Filecoin, at least as they exist today, you have to have some type of pinning, meaning that you have to kind of, go back and make sure that that data is available or else it'll go away. And I think that's the main value proposition of Arweave, is that it offers this idea of a single transaction where you can just pay once, and then you can expect to read that data for free forever. And not only are we talking about data, like when I speak of data, I'm thinking more like file storage. So we're talking PDFs, we're talking about videos and images and stuff like that. But you can also deploy entire applications in this manner. So imagine deploying an application to AWS and not having to pay that hosting fee monthly or weekly or whatever, or it's monthly or yearly or whatever that would be, or using one of these hosting providers. Not only that, if you don't pay that fee, your application goes away, but with Arweave, it's there forever. So you have this idea of applying this idea of a hyperstructure, which I'll talk about later, which was introduced by Zora, or actually introduced maybe before that, but made popular in Web3 by Zora, and how we can apply that to building full stack applications. So the definition as given by Arweave is it is powered by a scalable blockchain-like structure that uses a new mining system and a sustainable endowment to ensure the availability and permanence of arbitrary storage data. And the endowment is really interesting when you kind of try to understand how this actually works. You need some type of incentive mechanism for the different nodes in the network to continue serving this data, right? And when we think of an endowment in the traditional world, you might think of something like an endowment for a college, where you say, I graduated from this college and I made some money and now I'm going to give back to the college. And they don't just take that money and spend it. They typically invest it or put it in some type of mechanism that returns money. And therefore, they're able to kind of like continue having some type of revenue, I guess, to continue making use of that money. So they have this built into the protocol itself. So when you pay that transaction, that money isn't just going to someone's wallet or a miner. It's actually a part of it goes into this endowment. So in the future, when people run nodes to serve this data, that data is made, or the people running the nodes are able to get paid for serving that data in the future. Their consensus algorithm is environmentally friendly. It's something called succinct proof of random access, and it is their own, I guess, somewhat new of an idea of a consensus algorithm that's different than maybe what we're used to with proof of work or proof of stake. But they introduced with Arweave this idea of the permaweb, and I really love the idea of the permaweb because it makes a lot of sense, and it's something that we've just not grown used to. We're just so used to knowing that if we deploy an application, that if something like happens or goes wrong, our application is just going to go down, and we're just okay with that, right? Or maybe I deploy like my own personal website, and 5 years later, I want to kind of go back and read it. I can pretty much assume that it's not going to be there unless I've continued maintaining it and hosting it and paying for those fees. But with the permaweb, you have this idea of permanence that we're used to with the blockchain, but applied to file storage and applications. So we can just deploy something and expect for it to be there. And more importantly, we can also make them accessible via DNS. So I can say www.nader.com, and I can have my permaweb app deployed there. And obviously, I have to keep up with my DNS, but let's say I don't pay my DNS. That application is still accessible by the Arweave hash, similar to an IPFS hash. So permaweb apps are full decentralized web applications deployed to and hosted by Arweave. Limitations with permaweb apps is that you cannot do server-side rendering, so you can't do stuff like PHP applications or whatever. Most of these are going to be HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. But the great thing is today we have really, really robust and great tooling and great frameworks for building out single-page applications. So you can use, obviously, something like React, Vue, or something like that, but you can also use something like Next.js, which adds a lot of additional features, including routing, and then you can actually export that as a single-page application and deploy that to Arweave. So this is kind of like, to me, a very powerful part of the Web3 tech stack, being able to have this option. And again, this is just an option. I think when we talk about all the different Web3 technologies and how we can conceptualize where they fit in, it's always about trade-offs. Like, you shouldn't say, okay, this exists, so I'm going to use it. You should say, oh, this exists, and I understand why it exists, and I will use it in this scenario or this circumstance. So applications or permaweb applications live independently inside the permaweb, governed purely by their own code. Once launched, a permaweb application cannot be modified by anyone and can be used by everyone permissionlessly. So again, we're taking this idea of what we've been used to with the blockchain and applying it to applications, web applications. And what's interesting about this is that not only can you deploy your application this way, but you can actually have logic, API calls, and blockchain interactions built into the client. So not only are you querying data, but you can actually mutate that data, or not mutate, you can actually append new data to some type of query, for example. And Arweave also has an indexing system kind of built in, so you can actually do GraphQL queries and do filtering and things like that. So that's a really powerful thing that we're going to go over in my demo in just a moment. I mentioned hyperstructures, and I really like this blog post and this really well thought out post, or whatever you want to call it, that was written from the folks over at Zora. And they kind of just reiterated and kind of tried to dive into a little more depth around why protocols exist and why they're so powerful. And they kind of use this term hyperstructures, which isn't really new, but it's new, I think, for branding what Web3 protocols are. And they gave the definition that hyperstructures are crypto protocols that can run for free and forever without maintenance, interruption, or intermediaries. So how do we build hyperstructures? Well, we need web infrastructure, and we need the type of infrastructure that exists in place to be able to build these things. And I think in the past, we had the ability to build hyper APIs, hyper backends, which would be Ethereum and anything else future facing from that might exist 5 or 10 years from now, where we can save and read data. But we weren't really able to have that type of hyperstructure for file storage or for front-end application development. So I think that's kind of where Arweave is one of the first companies or protocols or teams, whatever, to kind of offer that. And I think that we're going to hopefully, obviously, see even more innovation in this space and more people building these types of protocols for other types of storage. They list a few different characteristics of a hyperstructure. It's unstoppable, it's free, it's valuable, it's permissionless. It has expansive fees, meaning the fees that go into the network essentially help continue to be distributed and power the network. Credibly neutral and positive sum. And I would recommend checking out, just Google hyperstructures Zora for the entire blog post. It's really, really cool overview. Now, how do you actually build these types of applications? Well, there's a few different pieces that I kind of labeled as the permaweb stack. So you have Arweave, which is the protocol. You have gateways, which allow you to interact with the protocol. There are a couple of public gateways that are given to you, and you can also run your own gateway. You have not only the ability to read an individual hash, which is great, which is what we've always had maybe with IPFS, but you also have this ability to tag data and then make it accessible via GraphQL queries with arguments, meaning that if I save 100 images and I want to go retrieve those images, I don't need to keep a list of all 100 images, right? I can actually tag each of those images with my name, and then I can query that GraphQL endpoint, which is an Arweave endpoint, and get all of those images back that were only mine, and I don't have to keep up with any additional images that are added. As long as they're tagged with that, you're essentially, again, having almost like an indexing system that's built into the protocol. So you don't have to keep up with this in some type of centralized manner. Also, GraphQL is just a really great querying language for building modern applications, and it's more performant than a REST API if you're building or in places that have to deal with like low latency, I guess you could say. And then another area that I haven't really explored that much, but I've already started using some applications that are built on top of it, is this idea of SmartWeave. And we're going to go over all those different pieces real quick. I mentioned gateways are similar to almost like RPC providers in the blockchain space, where you have a way to access the network. A gateway just gives you a gateway into the network. It's a content delivery mechanism, I guess you could say, to the network. GraphQL is a querying language that's similar to REST that allows you to define exactly the data that you want back and also pass in arguments for filtering and sorting and things like that. SmartWeave, the definition that they give is a simple smart contracting system allowing you to build incentive design elements into your applications. SmartWeave refers to a range of possible components for you to choose from, including different programming languages, caching mechanisms, execution engines, and more. And with SmartWeave, you can actually write your smart contracts in JavaScript, and I thought that was pretty cool, coming from the traditional web world where I am a JavaScript developer for the last 9 years or so. So how do you actually interact with Arweave applications that you end up needing to help pay transaction fees in the way that we have in the past? And this is less around the use case that I'm talking about for deploying an application and making it accessible and readable from everyone, because obviously you don't need a wallet for that. But let's say you wanted to build some client application that allows a user to send a transaction similar to how we might do with MetaMask. So let's say they want to add a new post or something like that. Well, in the past, you might have used something like RConnect, which to me was a really, really not good experience, because with RConnect, you actually have to have Arweave tokens. And to get Arweave tokens, it's a whole new ecosystem, and you actually have to live in certain parts of the world to be able to even get them from exchanges. And to me, it was kind of a deal breaker for building front-end applications with Arweave. You can always obviously build server-side applications and provide the tokens and subsidize that for yourself. But what if you want to have an open front end for other people to build on? So Bundler is something that came out a few months, no, it's been longer than that, maybe 6 months or so ago that I became aware of it at least. And it allows a multi-chain integration with Arweave, meaning that you can use any type of your main tokens, like I guess Matic, or you could use Avalanche, even Solana, Ethereum, obviously, which you probably wouldn't want to do, but things like that. Any low-cost network like Optimism and Arbitrum are supported. And you can also just use MetaMask. So you now have a way to interact with these applications just using what you already have in your browser probably, or in your application for client-side integration. And one of the reasons there's a couple of reasons that Bundler also brings a lot of really great benefits to the ecosystem. In addition to being able to use native tokens that you already have, we have this idea of chunking that is a limitation to the Arweave protocol itself, in my opinion, because no matter how much data that you save, you're paying for a 256 kilobit chunk, meaning that if you just save a string of text, you're saving that entire and paying for that entire transaction. But with Bundler, it actually bundles the transactions, almost kind of like how a rollup takes multiple transactions and posts them together. So therefore, you only charge for the data that you're saving, and that's about it. So it's up to 25 times cheaper, and it's also up to 3,000 times faster. So not only for reading, but also writing data, it's actually a lot faster with Bundler. So Bundler kind of like, to me, opened up the ecosystem for me as an application developer to take it a little more seriously. So how can you deploy an actual web application to the permaweb, like a single page application? There are a couple of different ways. You can use CLI tools like Arweave, Arcb, or Bundler. All of those are CLIs that you can use. But there's also starting to be an ecosystem of different front-end services, almost kind of like Next.js, like Vercel or Netlify and AWS, that allow you to kind of like do all this stuff under the hood. So one of those is Spheron, and Spheron allows you to just connect your GitHub repo to any application, and it deploys it, and you can add DNS, and it even gives you a custom DNS name off the bat. I'm going to do a quick demo because I only have less than 1 minute to go. And I have this application running on localhost 3000. We built this yesterday in my workshop. And we have this admin panel. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And here we're kind of prompted to define whichever token that we want to interact with. So I have Matic, Avalanche, Arbitrum set up. So I'm going to choose Matic. And we're going to connect our wallet just like we would if we were using any type of typical Web3 application. So I'm going to go ahead and sign this transaction. And this is going to go ahead and sign in. And in the web browser, we now have access to this instance of the web bundler, or the bundler instance, I guess you could say, for us to then interact on behalf of the user's wallet. I want to go ahead and upload a video, and we want to save this to the permaweb. I'm just going to look for anything with an MP4. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, now we're going to go ahead and upload this. It tells us how much it costs to upload. It's 0.003 Matic. That's going to be like 1/3 of a cent, I guess, something like that, or maybe 1/6 of a cent. And once we've uploaded it, we get this nice URI that's given to us, and this is saved forever. And I just have it linked there just for us to view it, and maybe we'll click on it in just a second. But I'm going to give a title of ETH Barcelona, and then hello world is the description. And then we're going to save. Well, let's go ahead and open this video up. So it looks like our video is saved. Now we want to save a transaction with metadata. So we're saving the URI to the video, we're saving the title and the description. And under the hood, I'm actually setting another description that's being passed in as a tag that will allow us to query that. And I just named this some random string. So this is some unique app name, blah, 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 ETHBC. So meaning anytime I hit the GraphQL gateway with that argument, I'm going to only get the videos back that I have saved. So I'll go ahead and save this video. The app will reroute me back to that main page after it's been uploaded. And now we have our video being served from the permaweb. And if we wanted to then deploy this application, I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and we'll see that query is coming through. If I wanted to deploy this forever, I would just run the CLI command, Arcb or Bundler, deploy it, I would have that transaction, and then this application would be literally running forever. And I think to deploy an application like a single page app or something like that, it's just like a fraction of a cent or so. It's really, really inexpensive to deploy like single page apps, and it's pretty cool. So that's it. I really apologize for being a little late for this talk, but I appreciate you coming through. I also have a full end-to-end workshop if you want to build out this application that we just demoed. It's under my GitHub at github.com/Dabit3, full stack Arweave workshop. It should be the second, first, or third repo in my GitHub. And this was built and updated specifically for ETH Barcelona. We went through it yesterday with a group of folks, and this is a great way to kind of get up and running with this tech stack. And I am over by a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming to my talk. If you have any questions, please come and find me. I'll be right out there talking to one of my friends that I'm already going to be meeting out there. But I encourage you to come hang out if you would like to. Thank you.